The year is 1831, a small village in rural England. Dawn breaks over frost-covered fields, and in a modest stone cottage, a mother awakens to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind. She rushes to the nursery, her heart already knowing what her mind refuses to accept. 3 empty cribs, 3 missing children. Her triplets, Elizabeth, Margaret, and little Thomas, just 18 months old. Gone. But here's what makes this story different from every missing children case you've ever heard. The mother knew who took them. She knew exactly who took them. And yet, for reasons that will shake you to your core, she couldn't tell a single soul. Not the constable, not her husband, not even the priest. Because the truth? The truth was more dangerous than the disappearance itself. Her name was Eleanor Ashford, a seamstress, a devoted mother, and according to every record we found, a woman with no enemies. So why, on that frozen March morning, did she stand in that empty nursery and weep in silence? Why didn't she scream? Why didn't she run through the village streets, begging for help? The investigators would later find something peculiar in her behavior, something that made no sense. She continued her daily routine, cooking, cleaning, sewing, as if nothing had happened. The neighbors noticed. Of course they did. Where were the children? Where were those beautiful triplets everyone adored? Eleanor's answer was always the same, delivered with hollow eyes and a trembling voice. They're visiting family in London. But here's the problem. Eleanor had no family in London, and the villagers, they knew it. So what was she hiding? And more importantly, from whom? 3 days pass, then a week, then 2. The village doctor, Thomas Pemberton, grows suspicious. He delivered those triplets himself through a harrowing night of complications that nearly claimed Eleanor's life. He'd watched her recover, watched her bond with those children with a fierceness he'd rarely seen. This wasn't a mother who'd willingly send her children away. He visits the cottage, knocks, waits. Eleanor opens the door, but only slightly, only enough to block his view inside. "The children?" Dr. Pemberton asks gently. "London," she whispers. But her hands are shaking so violently she can barely grip the door. "Eleanor," he presses, "let me help you." And that's when he sees it. Just for a moment, a flash of absolute terror in her eyes. Not sadness, not grief. Pure, primal fear. She slams the door. But Dr. Pemberton, being the kind of man who doesn't ignore his instincts, does something that will change everything. He goes to the constable. He reports Eleanor herself, not as a victim, as a suspect. Here's where the story splits into 2 horrifying possibilities. And for weeks, no one knew which was true. Theory 1. Eleanor had harmed her own children. Postpartum psychosis, sleep deprivation, poverty. The endless pressure of raising triplets alone while her husband worked 16-hour days in the textile mill. Perhaps she'd snapped. Perhaps those empty cribs held a darker secret than anyone wanted to admit. Theory 2. Someone had taken the children, and Eleanor was being forced into silence. The constable, Robert Thorne, searches the cottage, the grounds, the nearby woods. He finds nothing. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. But he does find something strange in Eleanor's bedroom. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard, a letter, not addressed, not signed, written in a hand that wasn't Eleanor's. It contained only 7 words. "Speak, and you'll never see them alive." Suddenly, Theory 2 became terrifyingly real. But this created a new question, one that would haunt everyone involved. If Eleanor knew who took them, why was she still obeying? What power did this person have over her? Constable Thorne turns his attention to Eleanor's husband, William Ashford. William worked at Thornfield Mill, a notorious textile factory owned by one of England's wealthiest industrialists, Lord Edmund Hartley. The conditions were brutal. Child labor was common. Accidents were frequent. And deaths? Deaths were quietly swept away. William had been working there for 3 years. Always quiet, always obedient, always afraid. When Thorne questions him about the children, William's reaction is bizarre. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't demand to know what happened. He simply says, "My wife has made her choice." "Her choice?" Thorne repeats, incredulous. "We don't speak of it," William mutters, staring at his hands. "We can't speak of it." "And then this detail will make your blood run cold." William rolls up his sleeve. Across his forearm, partially healed, is a burn mark, deep, deliberate, shaped almost like a brand. the same mark used to identify property at Thornfield Mill. Thorne realizes something devastating. William isn't an employee. He's owned. In 1831 England, debt bondage was technically illegal, but in practice, in the shadows of industrial empires built on exploitation, it thrived. Lord Hartley's system was simple and sinister. Offer desperate families loans they could never repay, then offer them work to pay off the debt. But the work never paid enough. The debt only grew. And if you tried to leave? If you tried to speak out? Well, accidents happened. Families disappeared. Children were taken as collateral. The authorities knew. Of course they knew. But Lord Hartley owned half the magistrates in the county. His wealth was protection. His power was absolute. So, when Eleanor's triplets vanished, Constable Thorne began to understand the impossible position she was in. Speak out, and the children die. Stay silent. And what? Would they ever come back? But wait, because this is where the story takes a turn that no one saw coming. Dr. Pemberton couldn't let it go. Night after night, he returned to that moment in Eleanor's doorway. That look of terror. He'd seen fear before, in patients facing death, in mothers losing children to fever. But this was different. This was the fear of someone trapped in hell, watching the flames rise, unable to scream. So he did something dangerous. Something that, if discovered, would cost him everything. He went to Thornfield Mill. At midnight. Alone. The factory loomed in the darkness like a sleeping beast, all smoke-stained brick and iron gates. But Pemberton wasn't interested in the factory itself. He'd heard rumors. Whispers from dying workers he'd treated over the years. Whispers about underground chambers. Storage rooms that weren't for storing cotton or machinery. Rooms for storing people. He finds an entrance, a delivery cellar left unlocked. Descends crumbling stone steps into blackness. The smell hits him first. Damp, rot, human waste. And then a sound. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A child crying. His heart nearly stops. He moves deeper, his oil lamp casting long shadows on stone walls. The corridor branches. He follows the sound getting louder now, more desperate. He rounds a corner and, there, behind iron bars in a makeshift cell, no bigger than a horse stall, are children, dozens of them, ages ranging from infants to teenagers, filthy, malnourished, hollow-eyed. And in the corner, huddled together, clutching each other with tiny fingers, 3 18-month-old children with Eleanor's unmistakable auburn hair. Elizabeth. Margaret. Thomas. Alive. But Pemberton's relief lasts only seconds, because behind him, he hears the scrape of a boot on stone. A voice. Cold, amused. Looking for something, Doctor? 2 of Lord Hartley's enforcers emerge from the shadows. Large men, scarred, expressionless. Pemberton tries to run. He doesn't make it 5 steps. They drag him to an office deep within the mill. And there, seated behind an ornate desk that seems grotesquely out of place in this den of misery, is Lord Edmund Hartley himself. 50s. Impeccably dressed, sipping brandy. Dr. Pemberton, Hartley says pleasantly, as if they've met at a garden party. You've discovered my little insurance program. Those are children, Pemberton manages, his voice shaking with rage. Those are leverage, Hartley corrects. Do you know how many workers tried to flee last year? How many threatened to go to London with stories of unsafe conditions? Before this system, dozens. After, he smiles, none. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. Hartley stands, circling Pemberton like a predator. Here's what happens now, Doctor. You leave. You forget what you saw. And Eleanor's children, well, let's just say their eventual return depends entirely on your silence. Eventual? Oh yes. The Ashfords owe me 12 years of servitude. Once that debt is paid, the children go home, assuming, of course, that nothing unfortunate happens to them in the meantime. Pemberton's mind races. 12 years. The triplets were 18 months old. They'd be nearly 14 by the time they were freed. If they survived that long, you can't. I can, Hartley interrupts. And I will. Unless you'd like to join them? He nods to the enforcers. We always need more workers. Pemberton is thrown out into the night, physically unharmed but mentally shattered. He has 2 choices. 1. Go to the authorities. But Hartley owns them. Any investigation would be buried. The children might be moved, or worse, killed before anyone could act. And Pemberton himself would likely disappear. 2. Stay silent. Let the Ashfords suffer 12 more years. Hope the children survive. Hope Hartley keeps his word. But there's a third option. One so desperate, so reckless, it barely qualifies as a plan. He tells Eleanor what he saw. The next morning, he goes to her cottage. This time, when she opens the door, he doesn't ask permission. He pushes inside and speaks in a rushed whisper. I found them. Your children. They're alive. Thornfield Mill, underground. Eleanor's legs give out. She collapses, sobbing 12 years of silent agony finally released. But we can't go to the law, Pemberton continues. Hartley's too powerful. We need another way. There is no other way, Eleanor chokes out. He said if we tried anything, he'd... I know what he said. But Eleanor Pemberton kneels beside her. Those children are living in hell. They're starving, sick. We have to do something. Like what? She cries. We have nothing. No money, no power, no... We have time, Pemberton interrupts. Not much, but enough. Hartley thinks we're beaten. He thinks we'll stay silent forever. That's his weakness. What are you saying? I'm saying we document everything. Every child in those cells. Every family he's destroyed. We build a case so damning that even Hartley's paid magistrates can't ignore it. And then we take it to London. To the House of Commons. To the newspapers. Eleanor stares at him. Hope and terror warring in her eyes. That could take months. I know. They could die before. I know, Pemberton says firmly. But it's the only chance they have. The only chance any of those children have. A long silence. Finally, Eleanor wipes her tears, sets her jaw. Tell me what to do. What follows is a covert operation that would put modern spy thrillers to shame. Dr. Pemberton treats workers from Thornfield, mill men and women too broken to be suspicious. He asks careful questions, collects names of missing children, dates, families willing to testify. Eleanor does something even more dangerous. She gets herself hired at the mill. A desperate widow looking for work, she tells them. Her children are with family. She needs money. They hire her immediately. After all, who better to control than someone already in Hartley's trap? She works in the upper floors, spinning cotton, breathing lint-filled air, her fingers bleeding from the rough thread. But at night, when the supervisors aren't watching, she slips small pieces of bread, stolen from her own meals, into her pockets. During shift changes, when the guards are distracted, she finds ways to descend. Brief moments in the corridors, seconds at a time, she reaches the cells. And there, through the iron bars, she sees them. Her babies, no longer babies, gaunt, frightened, but alive. She can't speak, can't risk it. But she slides the bread through the bars. Makes eye contact with Elizabeth, the oldest by 3 minutes, always the bravest. Eleanor mouths 2 words, soon, soon. But soon is a lie she tells herself every night. Because the documentation is taking longer than expected, witnesses are terrified to come forward. Several families Pemberton contacts mysteriously leave town before he can interview them. And then, disaster. One of Hartley's enforcers sees Eleanor near the cells. She's dragged to Hartley's office, thrown at his feet. Mrs. Ashford, Hartley says, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. You've been such a model employee, so dedicated. Tell me, what were you doing in the restricted area? Eleanor says nothing. Lost, perhaps? Hartley continues. Or visiting someone? Silence. Hartley's smile fades. He leans close, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. Your children are alive because I allow it. Their lives hang by a thread I can cut any time I choose. Do you understand? Eleanor looks up, tears streaming. But her voice, when it comes, is steady. I understand that you're a coward, that you hide behind locked doors and stolen children because you know deep in your rotten soul that the moment the world sees what you really are, your empire crumbles. Hartley's face darkens. You just sentenced them to... No, Eleanor interrupts. You did, years ago, and we're going to make sure everyone knows it. For the first time, Hartley looks uncertain. You're bluffing. Am I? Eleanor reaches into her dress, a movement so sudden that the enforcers grab her arms, but she's not reaching for a weapon. She pulls out a folded paper, drops it on Hartley's desk. It's a notice. From the Times of London. Publication date. Tomorrow. Headline. Children imprisoned. Lord Hartley's empire of bondage exposed. Hartley snatches it up, reading frantically. His hands shake, because the article is detailed, damning, complete with testimony from 24 families, diagrams of the underground cells, and a promise from 3 members of Parliament to launch an immediate investigation. "How?" he whispers. "You're not the only one with connections," Eleanor says quietly. "It took 4 months, but Dr. Pemberton didn't give up, and neither did I." The enforcers look at Hartley, awaiting orders. But for the first time in his life, Lord Edmund Hartley has no move left to make. Because tomorrow morning, the entire country will know his secret, and no amount of money can silence everyone. The investigation happened swiftly. Within 2 weeks, Thornfield Mill was raided. 47 children were found in those cells, including Elizabeth, Margaret, and Thomas Ashford. Lord Hartley was arrested, his wealth seized, his insurance program dismantled. But here's the part that breaks your heart. Those children, they were never the same. 18 months of trauma doesn't disappear. Thomas barely spoke for years. Margaret flinched at every shadow. Elizabeth developed night terrors that lasted into adulthood. Eleanor got her babies back. But they'd been taken at 18 months and returned at nearly 3 years old. They didn't recognize her. It took months of patience, of gentle reassurance, of proving over and over that they were safe, before the triplets began to trust again. Before they could call her mother without fear in their eyes. The truth that came too late wasn't just about Lord Hartley's guilt, it was about the cost of silence, the price of powerlessness. It was about a system that allowed monsters to thrive, because good people had no voice until they fought to create one. William Ashford was freed from his debt. Dr. Pemberton became a hero, though he never sought recognition. Eleanor lived to see her children grow. Elizabeth became a teacher, Margaret a nurse, and Thomas, against all odds, a children's rights advocate. But none of them ever truly healed, because some wounds run deeper than flesh. Some nightmares don't end when you wake up. So what can we learn from Eleanor Ashford's nightmare? From this almost forgotten chapter of history that nearly destroyed an entire family? First, silence is a weapon used against the vulnerable. Hartley's entire system depended on fear and isolation. He understood that people trapped in desperate situations will endure almost anything if they believe speaking out means losing everything. This pattern repeats throughout history in modern human trafficking, in abusive workplaces, in corrupt power structures. The antidote is always the same: community, documentation, and the courage to speak truth to power, even when it feels impossible. Second, institutional corruption thrives in darkness. The authorities knew about Hartley's operation. The magistrates he'd bribed, the constables who looked away, their complicity was what allowed children to suffer. This teaches us that justice requires vigilance, that we cannot assume systems will protect the innocent simply because they're supposed to. Reform requires pressure from below, from citizens, journalists, advocates who refuse to accept the status quo. Third, recovery is not the same as erasure. Eleanor got her children back, but they carried lifelong scars. We often hear the happy ending and assume everything returns to normal. It doesn't. Trauma reshapes people. It creates shadows that no amount of love can fully dissolve. This reminds us to have compassion for survivors, not just in their immediate rescue, but in the decades of healing that follow. Fourth, small acts of resistance compound. Dr. Pemberton couldn't storm the mill alone. Eleanor couldn't overpower the guards, but Pemberton could document. Eleanor could smuggle bread. Together, over months, they built something powerful enough to topple an empire. Change doesn't always come from dramatic revolutions. Sometimes it comes from ordinary people doing small, brave things consistently until the weight of truth becomes undeniable. Finally, the past echoes in the present. Child labor still exists. Debt bondage still traps families. Systems still protect powerful predators at the expense of vulnerable victims. Eleanor's story from 1831 isn't ancient history, it's a blueprint for understanding injustice today. The question isn't whether we've evolved beyond such horrors. It's whether we're willing to see them when they're happening around us, and whether we'll find the courage Eleanor and Dr. Pemberton found to risk everything for the chance to save children who have no voice of their own. Because the truth might come too late for some, but it's never too late to fight for the next victim. Never too late to break the silence. Never too late to choose courage over fear. In memory of the children who disappeared into England's Industrial Revolution, and the parents who never stopped searching,